So, whilst Execution Heinrix is still obscenely brutal, and in fact his best build, I actually wanted to show off a little bit of something else, which is a partial Demon Summoner build. So if you take the Tesseratium Mask and the Tesseratium Necklace, whilst you can't use Bedlam to force some Peril procs, which is actually a pretty interesting item. The user's attack still next 40 warp damage till the end turn, and each use psych power triggers Perils of the Warp, and you can't use obviously Edge of the Irreconceivable to really push the Veil rating. You can still use these items with Warp Buffer for Heinrix to make him a Demon Summoner. So let me just quickly show that off a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly move him around to get him into a better position, but obviously we still need to keep him within 4 cells of the bird. Yeah, I think I'll just pop him here for the moment. If I then... Oh, Pascal wants to move as well. So yes, so I've quickly just set that up. Probably should have used Air of Authority on my own little thing here, but whatever. But yes, I will quickly just pass a turn over to Heinrix. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition the Birdo to a little bit further forwards. So yes, this is still going to count within 4. So they're all still obviously within the relay. So if I trigger some Perils of the Warp here, I'm going to have to cast some abilities. Okay, so we're going the basic ones out. And we're about to do some of the bigger ones.
For the throne's glory, let's see to it.
Oh wow, somehow I did not trigger. Did I really not trigger? No, I've still got 2 stacks of breastplate. Apparently I did trigger, it just didn't do much. Okay, let's try a Staff Blast over here. Because obviously Heinrix has maxed out some of his stuff there. So we're going to come back around and let's try again. Let's see if we can... Where is our demon friends? Okay, so let's move the Raven here.
Let's see to it.
Demon friends, where are you?
Your turn.
Wow, the Cyber Raven does so much damage. I'm going to see if I can kill the boss with these Demon Incursions, because we've pushed Veil degradation up really high now.
Naturally. For the throne's glory.
There we go. So it didn't kill the boss, but as you can see, obviously the demon didn't kill us. Normally it will summon these and it will kill enemies with it, and you can obviously use more powers to keep summoning more. So if I use Strategic Adaptation, as long as there's enemies here, the demon will not kill us. So I'm just going to pop out some major powers. So again, we've summoned demons, but obviously because of Warp Buffer, it's not killing us, and I think the way that this is working at the moment is it's designed that these demons that we're going to bring into the battle, that will attack closest enemies, when there's not a boss, it will pass the perils to the enemies. So if we just obviously have a look here over in the log, yeah, Warp Relay effect applied, so that's on there. And obviously Heinrix causes Whiplash Perils of the Warp, and basically it's obviously not killing Heinrix because of Warp Buffer. So you can use this to bring in a lot of demons. Now, if you use obviously Edge of the Irreconceivable, the Force Sword, you can actually summon them a lot easier. But yeah, you can essentially just use this to spam the battlefield with demons. And yeah, we can just keep summoning demons that, yeah, when it warp buffers, it will pass to an enemy, but I don't think you can kill bosses with warp buffer anymore. I think that was part of the patch. But as you can see here, we're just freely summoning demons. And those demons, because of these items, so the way it works is because of the Tesseratium Mask, yeah, it summons that demon and attacks the closest non-demon target, and obviously we gain temporary wounds from it as well. And whenever Perils of the Warps triggers demons are summoned. And as you can see, my PR rating because of Shimmering Emulsion combined with Psycho's Breastplate is going through the goddamn roof. And if I wanted to, I could even quite easily use the Force Sword of this. Yeah, it's such a little funny gimmick that you can do. It's going to be stronger with a rogue trader, of course, but it's just one of those little things. If you want to do it, you can do it. So obviously we can absolutely blow the crap out of that guy. And now we just have a bunch of demons just standing. Yeah, it's just a fun little thing you can do. I've not really got the range talents on Heinrix list, so I can't pick off these last few guys. But obviously he's got the amount of possible melee attacks are limited to his psi rating for his main turn, so he can very easily do it. You can also use major powers from obviously the Psychic Force Sword, and you can just keep summoning demons to fight enemies for you. And obviously the demons themselves are going to be pretty nutty. But the thing is, for Heinrix as well, because we're using Veil Render, we're getting a lot of base damage as well. So obviously you've got your base damage coming in here, you've got your Force Swords, so then when we crit, yeah, our next hits do a lot of damage. Because, yeah, each critical hit score of this sword increases Veil Degradation by 25. The next attack for this sword does 500% more damage. So after you crit, you're getting 500% more base damage because of the way this sword works. So now that I've crit one dude, every guy that I hit as well, because of all these demon incursions, is just, it's going to be some obscene damage. And then you can use stuff once you've built up enough as well. You can then just pop on Daring Breach, and you can just fly around the map finishing off everything. Because obviously Daring Breach, you can generate MP from kills, which is coming in from the heroic actions of the warrior. It's a silly thing. Like, it's a way that you can turn your buffer into something more fun. You can keep him as a pure buffer, or you can do weird little gimmicks with Heinrix like this, and then just fly around the map killing things. Like, you could even give him Void Veteran Boots, and then he's got infinite charges, and then obviously the charges do extra damage based on his physical stats, because it's the way charge works. But yeah, as long as you crit, so this is why you kind of still want to buff him up to like force every hit to crit. But then you can do little things like this. I'll explain the build, and then we'll show a proper high-end combat without this. But this is just little things that I think is funny. Today we'll be covering Heinrix, and Heinrix is probably the most versatile character in the cast in the fact that you can build him as the top damage dealer or the top buffer. And unlike Idra, Heinrix can pass Daemon Incursions with Warp Buffer from the Cyber so he's incredibly strong with that. You could even make him a very strong ranged pure caster as a warrior, but I decided that with this one, rather than showing his Executioner like I did in 1.4, which is still viable if you want to see the new updated Executioner, this is on the spreadsheet, and if you want to see a little bit more of the playstyle of that, you can watch the previous video, but it's going to be less informative than that. But in this one, I'm mostly going to cover his Warp Buffer route, which can actually use Sword and Shield, and it creates more of a cleric-esque paladin playstyle, which is a lot of fun. And it can, like I showed earlier, be converted into a demon summoner build, though he can't use all of the items that the rogue trader could to make that even more chaotic. However, the thing that you're really going to want to consider with this build is giving him the Shimmering Emulsion, which is the new reward from your Act 5, where you go to recruit Cassia in Act 1. What this does is it gives you +1 permanent psi rating and gives you a 30% chance to proc Perils of the Warp. Now, you don't want to use this until you have Warp Buffer on your Psi Raven. The second you have that, you pop that on, and then when you buff, you have a chance that you will basically create Perils of the Warp, and that can be used with the Psycho's Breastplate, which you can pick up in Act 2 to rapidly farm and increase psi rating, because they've appeared to have fixed corpus conversion but could use a little bit more testing. But I don't think you can stack it beyond a +2, so you're not going to see 150 PR like you were before. And obviously you don't get Ghost Helm until Act 4. You now also don't get Eyes of Joyce until Act 4 as well, so that's sort of been delayed, but you can still get Warp Surge Brooch in Act 2, and then obviously you get Hand of Offense in Act 3. Now, I give him the Spirit Drape, so his buffing powers only cost 1 AP, and then you can do full rounds of buffs. You can use Veil Render early game, and then later on move on stuff like Sacrifice or whatever weapons you want. But more importantly, the Sanctified Staff is still the highest damaging staff in the game. And because the Psi Raven's Pain Bonds will allow you to use Degrade Defense, if you go in and you use, obviously, your buff route, that will stack your Psi rating. You then use Pain Channeling on your Raven, and then you hit some targets with the Sanctified Staff. The Raven will actually enhance that damage with stacks of Degrade Defense, so it becomes incredibly powerful late game for this build to be both a buffer and offensive. Like I said, less impressive damage numbers than what you're going to see on the Executioner build with the rock swords, but if you're bored of just running around rock swords and void veteran boots and ping pong between people, viable alternative, and he will heavily buff your party. So this is going to be a very strong route and option for you to go down. Heinrix starts as a warrior, and his level 4 ability has been trained from defensive maneuvers to rigorous training. So this is a big buff for many builds for Heinrix. So he, after a charge, doesn't cost his MP, and then he can keep moving to attack and do other things. So he comes with coercion still, but there's not much we can do about that. So he's going to have one less useful point, but he still has the warrior's basic charge, which is incredibly good because it gives you, for 2 AP, an extra attack, and there are talents that you can buff that, along with Endure, which can give you toughness deflection as well as temporary wounds, which is very strong. And Daring Breach is the second strongest heroic in the game, with Finest Hour being the strongest. Basically, this gives you a second extra turn. It can allow you to have unlimited attacks, and it can give you MP on kill, so it's incredibly useful. With rank 5, what I do is I go into Thick Skin, which gives them more deflection, and their parry chances increase by 25% of their total armor. So this is a good increase there, and we are going to be building into heavy armor on this build, whereas the Executioner can stay in light armor. We go into weapon skill because it's important to always get your weapon stats up first, because it's your hit chance, it's your parry chance, and it's your critical hit chance. I go into Enfeeble. You can pick Invigorate here, but I've struggled to fit in the healing talents to enhance that, which is why I prefer Enfeeble. So it lowers enemies' strength and agility, and it increases the incoming damage. Lowering their strength, it decreases their damage, lowering their agility decreases their dodge, and they take extra damage. So it's a very good AoE debuff. I take Medicae, so I can use Medicae packs if anything goes wrong, because I'm not picking up Invigorate. Weapon skill, another good increase. Psi rating is obviously a direct increase for Heinrix because it increases the potential of all of his buffs, all of his debuffs, and it increases his ranged damage abilities from his staves. Take Athletics because he is going to be strength based and we do want someone to cover that. Hardened Scars is obviously the best defensive talent for Warrior because every time you get hit you increase your deflection, and deflection is base damage reduction which applies after armor. So if you were to take 200 damage, your armor drops that down to 30, and then you've got 10 deflection, you then drop that down to 20, so it's very useful. Daring Breach 2 is obviously the best upgrade here because until the end of combat the warrior gains 4 MP for each kill, and they may use the MP after attacking or using abilities, so this is what allows you to clear encounters. Impertus is the rank 10 upgrade. The damage dealt by charge is increased by strength and toughness when the ability is used from 5 or more cells, so this is how you can really build up those melee damage, because we're not going into a melee damage tier 2 with the Cyber because it's a support build. We get some toughness because he's going to need that early on because he's a little bit more squishy than Ablar because he has less toughness. Shield the Emperor, it will be a fantastic increase for your party's defense early game. This makes him a very strong support character. Until the end of the Psyker's next turn, all allies affected by Word of the Emperor increase their deflection by +3, minimum 1, and armor by 13%. Now, this is going to be based on your resolve. So, actually, no, Psi rating, sorry. That's, when the second part is resolve. So, deflection is based on your Psi rating divided by 2. So, the more Psi rating you have, the more deflection you give, and you can stack that up quite quickly with Psyker's Breastplate from Act 2. And the resolve increases, yeah, that's what armor is. Almost misinformed you all. I also take Shield Mastery. The reason I take Shield Mastery is so we can use a shield in one set and we can use a staff in the second set. Unfortunately, you can't one-hand staffs unless you use a mod. Then bully for you that you don't need that if you're using that mod. More toughness, more athletics. Get ramming speed to increase distance of charge because we're not going to get reckless rush. This is quite important to get early on. I just throw in a point in Carews here because we are building toughness. And at rank 14 we get strength, so we can get to 45 strength, so we can pick on heavy armor, and we swap into heavy armor here because we are going to eventually build Psyker's Breastplate. We get Daring Breach upgrade 4, so this turn melee attacks deal an additional, I believe that's just strength divided by 2 damage. So it's a nice upgrade here, and it's better than what the other alternatives are in my opinion. So early game you're essentially going to be a Psyker attacker here. You're going to notice that the execution version goes into Pyromancy and uses Orchestrate Flames and two-handers. So being one-handed and using shields, we're going to be more defensive and we're going to have less overall damage, but we're going to have a lot more utility for the party with those 2 defensive talents, and then we're going to build in some more stuff into the tier 2. With Idara having the problems of the fact that her warp buffer doesn't pass demon incursions, and she has a 5% chance to do that, which means that she has a chance to instant die, which doesn't affect Heinrix or the Rogue Trader, I decided to make Heinrix my full-time buffer, and this is not the only way to play him. His strongest build is still the Executioner build, even with the changes in 1.5. However, I just feel more comfortable having him as my safe buffer, but even if you're using him to just buff the party, he's still an incredibly potent damage combatant. So you don't really have to worry about thinking that, oh, okay, now he's just a buffer, because there's a lot more he can do with it. So if I just show off a little bit of Heinrix here, so Heinrix, like I said, can very easily become a full-time buffer. So I'm just going to sort of move him and his little raven up a bit, so just in case some perils happen here. But because of items like Spirit Trait, you can buff freely with the cost of no AP. Early game, you're going to use Warp Sword Brooch to give him a number of PR attacks on his main turn, so he can still get a lot of attacks off. But he is going to be heavily reliant on Daring Breach and Finest Hour to get those in certain parts of the game, especially Daring Breach to get the movement unless you're using Void Veteran boots. With this in mind, at late game you can choose to use Hand of Offense instead of Warp Surge Brooch. So if I pop Heinrix up here, we can just freely set up all these buffs because they pretty much cost nothing. So we can just use the Raven to do that. And then we've still actually got some capacity here to cast powers. So I've still got 2 here. So I'm going to blast, say, these 2. Yeah, let's go with these 2 to get a blast. And then I can actually go in with my Finest Hour. So I can blast these chaps here. I'm not going to get the damage buff that I could get. But if I just pop on this, so then we still use the Purification Discharge on these enemies. So we can relay some damage. And we're going to just go in and start whacking some stuff. So if I whack this guy, it then moves damage over to that guy. So that's still some very, very respectable damage. We whack him again, still getting damage build up. Not critting as much as we could, like on, say, other builds. But we're still coming out with some very, very high damage here. And we can continue to keep building this damage up with melees. Or we can even use stuff that we've built up from like our Santic Staff to be doing some pretty respectable damage as well. Especially as you can get some of these degraded defense. Now, the damage with Emperor's Wrath is a little bit random at times. Because obviously it can be quite high or it can be quite low. But one of the things we can keep in mind is that because of the way Heinrix's ability works, we can actually loop cycle him quite nice. So we can actually set him up a few times, and because he's rapidly building PR because of the way Psyker's Breastplate and Shimmering Emulsion works, even if the first time we use him, it isn't as strong as he could be, he can always get stronger. So if we just pop this around here, and then we say move over our relocate for our Raven to here. We have our Raven now give that guy a little bit of some double damage setup, and then we move Heinrix over. I'm going to pop off the Endure here. Give some buffs here, and then if we actually charge in on this enemy, boom, big damage. it's still big damage. So obviously that charge there, because we had our buff set up, it does rapidly still build up. Like I said, it's not going to be as impressive as what we were previously seeing with with the Executioner build, but it's a safe buffer and it can still do incredibly respectable damage to just absolutely wipe the battlefield. And as you can see, I can even use my staff there to build up MP because of Finest Hour. And then, yep, I can still just run around, smack and one-shot things. So, absolutely fine, absolutely comfortable. Like I said, not as powerful as his setup with using the Executioner, but still incredibly strong with a good mix of range and close combats. As noted, Executioner is definitely the highest damage output that you can do of any companion, especially on Heinrix, whilst Arc Militant can also be quite fun and Vanguard is an option. When it comes to support, I just prefer Overseer, so we take the Cyber proficiency because it has a lot of utility for powers. Now, with the Stabilize fix, giving all allies 24 temporary wounds, 70% armor, pretty good to get in at the start, and it really does help with footfall in the early game. I pick up Psych Majoris because, again, that boosts everything he can do, and he can also now relay buffs, so he's given that Iron Arm to the entire party, which comes as part of his Biomancy starting class. Overcharge will allow you to do attacking powers in the AoE, but we don't have any of those just yet. Rank 5, we're going to build into some weapon skill. We're going to get Sacrificial Penance, because what this does is when you relay attacking powers through the Raven, it actually uses the Raven's willpower, and it uses the Raven's willpower for some of his damaging abilities, which is going to be his Bonds of Pain. So the way that that works is very interesting. So I'm going to stop explaining some of the archetypes so we can just go over what this actually does, because it's a very strong ability. So what the Raven does, he has an ability called Purification Discharge. Cyber-Raven deals Overseer's Psi rating times the familiar's willpower bonus shock damage to the 3 closest enemies in a 4-cell radius around it. Now, what that also does is it gives them Bonds of Pain. A creature is connected to the Cyber-Raven. When the creature suffers damage, the next instance of damage, the familiar's willpower divided by 3% of that damage up to a maximum of 100% will be dealt to all connected targets as mental damage. So obviously the more willpower you have, the more damage that does. And if you can get the Raven to, say, 300 willpower, that means it will fully pain channel all that damage. However, it doesn't just duplicate the damage. It also applies damage riders to it, so stuff like degraded defense stacks, if they're on the enemy, this will get enhanced. Any debuffs that increase damage that they receive will also get enhanced, such as Enfeeble, and even stuff like Warp Minds that can be put on by sensory deprivation. So it's a very powerful damage booster. So continuing on with the build here, after Sacrificial Penance, I get Warp Speed. So this is an AoE buff to the party that increases MP and Agility and AP. The more Psi rating you have, the stronger these buffs will get. So multiple turns of buffing will actually increase the party. And with Spirit Drape, all your buffs are 0 AP anyway, besides Warp Speed, which is just 1. Take Right of Calibration. So the first use of an Overseer ability in combat costs 1 AP less. So that's very useful for that first bring it down turn to get set up. More Toughness, Psychoterminus, because obviously more Psi rating, more good. Rank 10, we take Warp Buffer. So this is incredibly powerful. As long as the Overseer and an enemy are within 4 cells of the Cyber-Raven inside that warp channeling field, Perils of the Warp are transmitted to a random enemy. Idra can't do this with Daemon Incursions that have the insta-kill effect. Heinrix can. So can the Rogue Trader, and so can Mercenaries. So it's a lot stronger on Sanctioned Psychers than it is on Unsanctioned Psychers. The devs said that this was intentional, and I did point out that, well, why only for Unsanctioned? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, but I didn't want to push it too hard in case they nerf Sanctioned Psychers as well. Rank 11, we get some Toughness and Athletics, because those are going to be the skill checks that I'm covering on this. Again, you have other options for skill checks with Heinrix. Do check the spreadsheet for that. Then the Overcharge upgrade 2. Whenever the Overseer uses Overcharge, their familiar gains 30 to all its key characteristics 1 round. The next round, the bonuses becomes +10 lasts till the end of combat. So the more stats, the more damage that the Raven's going to transmit, because obviously you use anything with willpower involved will use the Raven stats, not your stats. Though it will use your Psi rating, just not your willpower. The effects of the psychic powers relayed through the Cyber-Raven is calculated as if it was 1 Psi rating higher. Oh, and you also get Warp Saturation. When the Psyker's allies or the Psyker themselves are under the effects of psychic powers, they gain +5 toughness for each such effect. One thing I should have noticed, when you take Warp Buffer at rank 10, that's when you want to inject the Shimmer in Emulsion that you picked up in Act 1, because now you can give those dangerous little perils to enemies, so you can get that +1 buff to Psi rating completely safe and don't need to worry about that 30% cast. Anytime after that as well, as soon as you can get the Psychic Breastplate, you're going to want to throw it on Heinrix, depending on how efficient you are with building up faction rep, depends when you'll get that, as well as how quickly you progress profit factor. Anyway, rank 14, more Perception, more Cruise. Rank 15, Hammer of the Emperor, so it will give everyone in the party one big whack, as it gives a big base damage increase for the next attack for all allies, including the Raven. Then we'll get Psi Resonator. Whenever the Overseer relays a power through the Cyber-Raven for the first time in the round, they regain 1 AP, so it's quite useful. Blade of Light. So this one, force weapons get +8 damage and have 40% more armor penetration. That armor penetration as well is incredibly huge for force swords. If you don't want to be attacking with Heinrix, you can take Destined here instead, but I do like to still max things with a sword. It's around here that he gets viable in melee as well. He's always done good damage because force swords are very strong, but noticeable power creep here. It's Perception you need for Act 3 to be able to hit Drukhari. They are very high agility characters. More Cruise. Enhanced Augmetics, the Familiar's key characteristics are increased by 5, so that's agility and willpower, both of those you want to increase. Then we get Psycho Extremist and Overcharge 1, so whenever the Familiar becomes a target of an enemy attack, the Overseer has their damage dealt increased by 2%. This effect stacks and lasts till the end of combat. I've never seen enemies attack my Raven, and combat is normally over if I'm using Overcharge, so I've never really got much mileage out of that, but it just seemed better than the other options.
Before I go on to Exemplar, I do need to mention that yes, Chainsaw Heinrix as an Executioner is still the strongest potential damage build in the game. Nothing has changed from the last patch, it's still just as strong as it's ever been, although you'll find some Act 5 enemies now have immunity to 2 of the 3 dots. However, the standard build that I showed in 1.4 you can still use. I've updated the spreadsheet to be a little bit more min-maxed with it as it currently stands, but you can still use Inflame and Orchestrate Flame to have some crazy buffed up damage that, as I can show you here, you can just Finest Hour over to Heinrix and your one-turn encounters incredibly easy, especially with stuff like the Void Veteran boots that will allow you to ping-pong between multiple enemies, or you could even be using stuff like Inertia boots, just have unlimited movement until you get to the Void Veteran boots, which is accessible from Act 2. So as you can see, everything I'm going to do here is going to one-shot everything in my path, and it's going to be no different. And buffs are just Cassia buffs, no extra Psycho buffs other than what Heinrix provides himself. So, and you can still stack PR. I'm not even using Psycho's Breastplate here. You can use Psycho's Breastplate, but it's entirely up to you how you want to play it. But as you can see, nothing's going to survive, and kills will generate free charges. So very easily, you can just ping pong and one-shot entire encounters, and you can take it out very easily. You can even still use Daring Breach on your Finest Hour turn, so you can generate more MP as you get kills, and you can very easily have a secondary staff to range blasting, so you're never really going to struggle to get around or to hit anything. As you can see here, I still one-shot everything in the encounters, so it's still a very strong build. If you don't want to build for a buffer, then definitely do still build for Warrior going into Executioner, finish down with 2-handers and maybe even 4 swords, and then finally finishing up on Rock Swords because they are incredibly powerful. You can use them stuff with like Invigorating Resolve and Malpain Shroud, or you can just stack the buffs, whichever have you.
Alright, moving on to Exemplar. Now, you might notice there's some little asterisks on the build spreadsheet if you're following there. This will be on Eager for Battle and Great Defense. The reason, and like I say in every video, that is there is because you can take Destroyer first or Eager for Battle. So Destroyer is what you need to set up Degrade Defense, and you want that by level 40 for your final battle in the boss fight of Act 3. However, there are many ways to get armor strips. So if you're using ionized grenades, you want the AP increase so you can make more actions in the first round, but if you want ways to strip the enemy's armor, then you take that first. It's very good with stuff like Metal Claw Gloves. So rank 1, you can take Eager for Battle or Destroyer. You get Crowd Kill because this will even apply strength damage to your Psycho Staff attacks without use AoE. Athletics, Edge of Dawn, another damage increase, 10% extra damage, which is always nice. We take some more weapon skill, Subtle Manipulation. So the reason I take this is because the enemies will surround you in the Act 3 boss fight. You want to be able to use powers without getting smacked, and it's only offensive powers that trigger attacks of opportunity. I also take Pyromancy because we can start building some offense because we've already built up all of his buffing potential. And at rank 5 we get Degrade Defense and Backdraft that drastically increases our damage potential here because it deals extra half damage to nearby enemies. You get Pain Channeling, blah 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 blah. Lots of good, lots of win. Rank 6 we get some weapon skill, we get Desolation. Yes, we're not boosting agility through levels, but because of Warp Buffer, this is a direct base damage increase. Strategic Adaptation, when you kill, will refund our attack and we can keep attacking. It also increases our damage, so the Strategic Adaptation is very good. Don't take it early because, like I said, focusing on buffing, not damage. Melting Armor, when it works, very good because more armor strip, more damage that you do. Psalm of Heroes, Psycho Psi rating is increased by +1 until the end of combat every time an ally uses a heroic act, so that would be you and other allies. Cruise, Destroyer at rank 9 or Eager for Battle. If you've already picked up Destroyer early, good, it's going to be doing a lot of mileage for you. If you picked it up late, it's going to be useful to get in. Yes, we've not built up much strength, so it's going to be quite low at the start, but that's why the next one we're going to get is going to be peak condition. AP increase, Fire with him. Yep, every time you get 8 crits on different creatures or kills, you can refund an attack. The late game, there's not actually that much enemies, so this is actually very useful in the early game, not so useful in the mid game, and less useful in the end game, but it is always nice to have. More crews, open engagements are quite useful because if there are no enemies adjacent to the warrior at the start of their turn, the warrior's damage increased by 16 for 1 melee attack. It's just a one-time damage boost. Brother-in-Arms is going to increase your resolve. Your resolve is going to be based on your sanctified staff, so that's going to increase all your damage using that staff. We get willpower, we get some Medicae, we're getting Medicae late. The reason is we've got nothing else to boost at this point when it comes to stats, because there's no other checks that we can make, so we might as well increase how much we heal if we need to do that. Like I said, peak condition, the character gains bonus to their strength equal to 20% of their maximum wounds. This boost will increase your melee damage quite significantly, as well as your armor strip. Easy target will increase your crit damage against enemies that are not armed with a melee weapon. Sanctified Slayer will help increase your critical hit chance, because you do want to be critting, especially if you're using Veil Render. More Medicae is good. Hymns of Hatred is also good. Again, critical hit scored by anyone within the Psyker's line of sight, including the Psyker themselves, increase the Psyker's critical damage by 1% until the end of combat, and it stacks. Works like Fired Up on Soldier. Incredibly powerful tool. More useful when you're using rock saws. Deterioration, whenever the effect applied by the Psycho increases damage suffered by the target, this effect is increased by half. For example, 20% increase becomes 30% increase. Metabolic Overcharge, this is incredibly powerful. You can turn your psi rating into action economy for allies. If you target that ally, they will start taking damage. However, Invigorating Resolve can counteract that. Another combo that you can use, if you use this on a soldier, then using Trench, they can actually bank all the AP they've gained for it, and then on their next turn, when they use Run and Gun, they'll get all that AP back, and they won't be taking damage. Very good if you then follow up with Finest Hour. More willpower, because towards the end you do want to build a little bit of willpower, even though Chains of Domination and Vortex Pendant can build up a lot of willpower quite quickly. Extermination, yep, more attacks, more damage, pretty good. And Eternal Glory is just a late one coming in. You can swap this if you want, but the first time your momentum reaches 200 during the Psyker's turn, Psyker gains +5 to all characteristics, +1 resolve, and +1 to deflection, and +1 to damage that the Psyker deals until the end of combat. So that will actually bring the build together, but let's talk about a little bit of itemization for here. So with the Helm, if you're not using the Demon Summoner build, because obviously you want to use the mask over with the Tessarian mask and the necklace. Eyes of Joy Suisse that you get in Act 4, pretty good. They've changed it to Act 4 now. There's also over on Idra, I've got the Ghost Helm. Ghost Helm is also pretty good because obviously you use willpower for dodges, and every time you dodge an attack you can increase psi rating. Less useful on Heinrix because you're not going to be very dodge heavy, but there's also stuff like you can't use the Cultist Hood on Heinrix, but you could swap that over to Idra. And again, Dark Visionary Hood you could use, but I don't really use powers that much. I don't really want to take the weapon skill decrease. As I'm explaining some stuff, some guys are something along. I really should have turned that alert off, but luckily I don't think I have the alert sound on, so good. Oh, and I've just noticed the Laughing Wolf Helm actually got a new icon. I didn't realize that. Sorry, just distracted myself a little bit, but back to Heinrix. Yes, Warp Side Brooch, very good, or you could swap that out for Hand Over Fence. You definitely want Spirit Trait for buffing. Vortex Pendant, like I said, you could swap that out for Starmist Scarf, or the Tessarium Necklace if you're doing Demon Summoner. Because, because Heinrix isn't going to be using as much targeted buffs, because obviously you've got Warp Buffer, you've got Iron Arm, so that's plus 10 willpower that you're going to be seeing there. And if you loop that around, you'll get that a few more. The Abyss of Conda, yeah, every time the Psychic Staff is used, Psychic Power deals 12 additional damage. Not too bad. You can swap these out to have gloves, like anything to enhance weapon skill is going to be good here, but obviously you're not going to get the same gloves that Idra has. Boost Decay, Mage Psychic powers causing enemies to lose their deflection is quite good. You could also use the Numo boots if you want to have better charges, or even Void Veteran boots. As I've got at the moment, I've got like the Sword and Shield, but you could very easily still just use a Rock Saw. It's not going to be as efficient as if you had, say, set this up to use Malpain Shroud, because you want ways to increase the base damage. So Malpain Shroud with Invigorating Resolve is another setup that you could use here. So if you took, have I got Invigorating Resolve somewhere else? Yes. So if you actually took Invigorating Resolve, you took Malpain Shroud, and you took Void Veteran boots, you could put them all on Heinrix and still use the Rock Saws and still build up incredibly high base damage. You could basically buff the party and then just start charge ping-ponging and one-turn the encounter that way. So it's another option there, and if you just keep looping and stacking Resolve, so obviously having other allies that can help boost your resolve, which is normally better for a master tactician, but you can do some incredible damage with the Sanctified Staff. You can put other staffs here, but this is just the best one, or like I said, you can even have a secondary Rock Sword set. I just like the whole sort of Sword and Shield aesthetic, so it's why I've gone for that this way. And like I said, if you want to go for that Executioner, do check those other builds, but I will bring up the spreadsheet now and just go through a couple of little extra things there. So yes, as we're looking at this build, like I said, I have noticed that you can swap Destroyer and Eager for Battle around, and there are even some other things that you can move some things in other areas. Like say you wanted to swap Sacrificial Penance around and Warp Buffer, you could, and then you could take Shimmering Emulsion earlier. Definitely viable and definitely an option. But if you don't want to go the full buff route, like I said, I do have an older video based on 1.4 as well as some item suggestions. But yes, I have actually updated the ordering of stuff for his Rockstar Executioner build. So obviously we get Master of Torture a little bit earlier, Fragile Playerphones, Wrecking Weakness. They give some more ways to drop enemies armor, which will drastically increase your damage. Again, Eager for Battle and Destroyer you can mix around. But Destroyer mixed with Fragile Playthings and Wrecking Weakness with high Medicae, yeah, it does some serious damage. It really enhances the dots that you do, which is why I'm using that a lot. If you notice on a lot of my builds, I've kind of dropped vital points because I'm not sure if it's working in 1.5. So I've actually been moving it off the builds. I don't know if it needs fixing because I've just not been noticing it. I need to actually do some testing. CRPG Bro actually messaged me earlier asking about that, and I'm really starting to think it might not be working. I'll report that to the devs to investigate as well, and I'll do a little bit of my own investigating. But yes, so this build, if you wanted pure damage, very, very good. But it's just, I find it safer with Idra being the only one that can suffer Perils of Warp to make a safe buffer. But you don't need a Psycho buffer. If you just want to go Psycho damage and just be like all damage all the time, one officer is more than enough to buff the party. So these are some other options. That's what you can switch around with. Play whichever you like, but thanks for stopping by. I've been Revan619. I hope you've enjoyed this build. And yes, it's not going to have as crazy an epic damage montage because it's a support build. But if you want the crazy epic damage, go look at my old Heinrix videos because, yeah, he can do some crazy damage. Like I said, I've used this build previously with an edited final boss to 500 million health and still one-turned it because there are some AP generations that you can still do a Bloody Pact and the regen on this. They're absolutely insane. But I've been your host. I'll see you next time. Do feel free to come stop by a live stream and ask questions. Until next time, I'm out. Bye for now.